One forgotten debate in 1832 could have changed history and maybe even prevented the Civil War. But what could drive the leaders of Virginia to the brink of abolishing their own way of life? The answer was not a sudden crisis of conscience. It was an explosion of violence 5 months earlier, an event set in motion by a single man. It began on a humid August night in 1831 in the forests of Southampton County, Virginia. 7 enslaved men gathered around a fire. Their leader, a literate, charismatic preacher named Nat Turner. Turner saw himself as a prophet, divinely chosen to shatter the chains of bondage. For 36 hours, he and his followers cut a bloody path through the countryside, a rampage of retribution that left 57 white men, women, and children dead. The response was swift and merciless. Local militias and federal troops crushed the rebellion. The violence did not end there. In the weeks that followed, a wave of terror washed over the black community. White mobs, gripped by fear and rage, unleashed a furious backlash. They murdered at least 120 and perhaps as many as 200 black people, most of whom had no connection to the uprising. The Southampton Rebellion was over, but a new, more potent force had been unleashed: fear. The massacre sent a shockwave across Virginia and the entire South. The comfortable narrative of a benign, paternalistic institution, of a contented and docile enslaved population, was shattered overnight. For the first time, white Virginians were forced to confront the violent reality simmering just beneath the surface of their society. In the halls of power in Richmond, a question that had been whispered for decades was now being asked with terrifying urgency: what was to be done about slavery? In 1831, Virginia wasn't united on slavery. It was tearing itself apart. Virginia was the political and cultural heart of the South. What happened here would ripple across the nation, contrary to the myth of a monolithic and pro-slavery South. Virginia was a state deeply divided against itself. For years, a quiet but persistent anti-slavery movement had been growing within its borders. The Society of Friends, known as Quakers, had long petitioned the government, condemning slavery as a sin against God and an affront to humanity. Evangelical Methodists preached against it from the pulpit. In the western mountains of the state, rugged yeoman farmers, who owned few or no slaves, saw the institution as an engine of aristocratic power that stifled their own economic progress. The terror of Nat Turner's rebellion galvanized these groups. The fear of another, larger uprising was a powerful motivator. In a move almost unheard of for the era, women from Augusta County sent their own petition to the legislature. "We pretend not to conceal from you," they wrote, "our fathers and brothers, the fears which agitate our bosoms and the dangers which await us." They argued that the peace of their homes and the welfare of their society demanded the ultimate extinction of slavery. When the Virginia General Assembly convened in December of 1831, it was under immense public pressure. 39 counties had sent petitions demanding action. Some called for the colonization of free blacks in Africa. Others proposed plans for gradual emancipation. A few even demanded the immediate abolition of slavery. The stage was set for a debate that had the potential to alter the course of American history. The governor wanted more chains, not fewer. But the legislature? They were about to face the biggest question of their lives. Should they even dare talk about ending slavery? The tone was set by Governor John B. Floyd. In his opening message to the legislature, he urged the delegates to revise the laws to preserve due subordination of the slave population. His solution to the violence was not freedom, but tighter control. Yet the calls for a more fundamental solution could not be ignored. The House of Delegates formed a 13-man committee to consider the petitions. Almost immediately, the body faced its first test. When petitions from the Quakers and other citizens calling for emancipation were brought forward, a conservative delegate from Mecklenburg County, William Goode, moved to reject them outright. He argued that discussing emancipation was dangerous and irrelevant. But then an unexpected voice emerged. William Henry Broadnax, the very militia commander who had brutally crushed Nat Turner's rebellion, rose to speak. He argued that the legislature had a duty to consider the petitions of its citizens. The House agreed. In a stunning rebuke to the conservatives, they voted 93 to 27 to allow a full and open debate on the future of slavery in Virginia. For the first time in American history, the doors to a legislative chamber in the South were thrown open to the public to debate abolition. The genie was out of the bottle. On January 11, 1832, Samuel McDowell Moore, a delegate from the western county of Rockbridge, took the floor. He spoke directly to the fear that gripped the state. Recent events, he declared, had opened the eyes of the whole people to the magnitude of these evils and to the imminence of the danger. He attacked the very foundation of the institution, calling slavery the heaviest calamity that has ever befallen any portion of the human race. He argued it was an economic evil, creating a class of idle poor whites who scorned labor as, quote, slave work. His speech was a direct assault on the economic and social order of Virginia. The next day, the conservative faction delivered its thunderous reply. James H. Gholson, a delegate from Brunswick County, articulated the defense of slavery that would become the South's unwavering ideology for the next 30 years. He did not appeal to morality. He appealed to law and property. Emancipation, he roared, was monstrous and unconstitutional. The enslaved were property, worth $100 million. To free them would be to confiscate that property without compensation, an act of tyranny. Quoting Shakespeare, he warned his fellow delegates, "You do take my life, when you take the means whereby I live." Gholson then turned his fire outward. He blamed the insurrection on, quote, incendiary publications from Northern abolitionists, painting the desire for freedom as a foreign contagion infecting the minds of the enslaved. In a chillingly prescient moment, he delivered a threat. If this Northern agitation were to continue, he declared, "I would appeal to war and deem it the lesser evil." The battle lines were drawn. On one side stood those who saw slavery as a moral and economic cancer that threatened to destroy Virginia from within. On the other were those who saw it as a sacred right of property, a cornerstone of their society to be defended at any cost, even war. For 2 weeks, the debate raged in the Virginia Capitol, with the fate of the nation hanging in the balance. On January 16th, the Select Committee delivered its report. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, it had reached a conclusion. It found that it was, quote, inexpedient at the present to make any legislative enactments for the abolition of slavery. It was a carefully chosen word, inexpedient. Not wrong, not immoral, not unconstitutional, simply ill-timed. The abolitionist faction refused to accept this. William B. Preston of Montgomery County, a progressive voice from the West, immediately offered an amendment. He moved to strike the word inexpedient and replace it with expedient. It was a simple change of a single word, but its meaning was monumental. A vote for Preston's amendment was a vote to declare that the time for abolition had come. It was a vote to begin the process of dismantling slavery in Virginia. The debate intensified, reaching a fever pitch. For 9 more days, the delegates argued, their speeches filled with a mixture of hope, fear, and righteous fury. Finally, on January 25, 1832, the question was called. The House of Delegates voted on Preston's amendment. The roll was called, delegate by delegate. The amendment was defeated. The final vote was close, but it was decisive. The last, best chance for a legislative end to slavery in Virginia was lost. To soften the blow, the House added a preamble to the final resolution. It acknowledged the great evils of slavery and stated that future action, quote, should await a more definite development of public opinion. But everyone in the chamber understood the truth. The slave-holding elite had weathered the storm. They had successfully postponed the question indefinitely. One vote could have ended slavery peacefully. Instead, Virginia chose chains. And 30 years later, America paid in blood. Having defeated emancipation, the Virginia legislature moved to ensure such a challenge would never rise again. It passed a new draconian police bill, a set of laws designed to crush the spirit of the black population. It became illegal for enslaved or free blacks to preach. All nighttime gatherings were forbidden. Free blacks were barred from owning firearms and were pressured to emigrate to Liberia. If they refused, they could be denied the right to work in their chosen trades. Instead of loosening the chains of bondage, the debate in Virginia had made them tighter and heavier than ever before. The arguments forged in the fire of that debate now became hardened doctrine. The pro-slavery faction, having honed its message, took it to the public. Benjamin Watkins Lee, a delegate from Richmond, published A Letter from Appomattox, a fiery defense of slavery as a constitutional right. He argued that emancipation was an attack on property and called for slave-holding counties to form their own militias to put down future insurrections. At the same time, a professor at William and Mary named Thomas Dew published a highly influential treatise that would fundamentally change the Southern defense of slavery. He argued that the institution was a, quote, positive good. It was a civilizing force, he claimed, that rescued Africans from barbarism and provided them with the paternal care of a benevolent master. It created an orderly, stable society. This insidious ideology spread rapidly across the South, providing a moral and intellectual justification for perpetual bondage. The Virginia slavery debate of 1832 was a definitive turning point in American history. It was the moment the South chose its path. The arguments that defeated emancipation in Richmond became the playbook for the entire slaveholding South for the next 30 years. James Gholson's defense of slavery as a sacred property right would be echoed by Southern statesmen like John C. Calhoun. It would be enshrined in law by the Supreme Court in the infamous Dred Scott decision of 1857, which declared that black men had no rights which the white man was bound to respect. The idea of Northern agitators destroying the Southern way of life would fuel a growing sense of sectional resentment that made compromise impossible, and Gholson's threat of war would become the Confederacy's final, tragic answer. The failure of the Virginia legislature closed the last meaningful path to a peaceful, internally led abolition of slavery. By successfully defending the institution as a property right and painting abolition as a hostile attack from the outside, the slaveholding elite had ensured that any future challenge would be met not with debate, but with force. The nation was set on a collision course. The questions left unresolved on the floor of the Virginia House of Delegates would be answered 30 years later, not with votes and speeches, but with cannon fire and blood. One vote, one moment, one lost opportunity had sealed the nation's fate, and the long, dark road to civil war had begun. If you want more videos like this, subscribe so you don't miss the next one.